Hello, my name is Letizia Pastore, and I'm a sophomore in high school, and I'm the health ambassador at Second Harvest, and I'm also the director of the Health and Wellbeing Department at Protect the Children, a nonprofit organization. I'm very passionate about health and food and their impact on our well-being in general. And today I'm joined by Casey Crosbie, who is a certified eating disordered registered dietitian supervisor. She also owns Crosby Nutrition, which is a private practice in Berkeley, California, and she's serving the greater Bay Area through virtual nutrition counseling, professional supervision, as well as community outreach. Ms. Crosby also co-developed the plate-by-plate approach outlined in her book, which I will show right now. So right here, How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder. She also previously served as Director of Nutritional Services for the Healthy Teens Project, as well as the lead dietitian for the Lucille Packard's Children's Hospital Comprehensive Care Program for eating disorders at Stanford. So first, I wanted to thank you for being here again and for giving us the opportunity to learn more about such an important and maybe even a little bit delicate topic. So for my first question, I know that for your work, you primarily focus on eating disorder recovery. However, for this interview in particular, we'll mostly cover how to build healthy relationships with food within our communities, with a particular attention to sustaining the joy in eating. So first, just to give our viewers an idea, can you briefly introduce your concept of the plate-by-plate approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. The plate-by-plate approach is a visual, no numbers approach to planning balanced meals and snacks. It focuses on using a 10-inch, just a standard dinner plate, which is about 10 inches, as its foundation, and then breaking it into different food groups and visually creating meals that are balanced and cohesive and yummy and satisfying. So there isn't an emphasis on counting, there isn't an emphasis on measuring or counting calories or anything like that. It's simply using what foods are normal for your family within your culture. Food allergies can be accommodated, all of that, so that you can eat balanced and normal meals and really enjoy them.
Oh, wow, I really like that approach. So that kind of brings us into our next question. So looking at your website and your book, I saw that your focus is on a visual and appealing approach, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think, or why do you think this is more beneficial than methods such as counting calories or strict food deprivation diets?
Great question. Research has shown time and time again that restrictive diets and calorie counting are ineffective, and they can often lead to weight cycling, eating disorders, a whole host of issues, both psychologically and medically. The plate-by-plate approach, though, is just a visual tool without, the focus on numbers. It's flexible, it's intuitive, and it really leads to just joyful eating as the focus and the end goal.
Got it. Yes. And then here we can also see more of this approach as you were talking about with the everyday foods being split up in a nice visual approach.
Yes.
And so many people, like you mentioned, how maybe eating or counting calories and using that as your source for how much to eat, it can lead to a kind of set mindset, especially in teenagers, linking health and being skinny together. So what do you think the best way is to educating people to have a healthy lifestyle, but without an extreme fixation on achieving the ideal body type?
Great question. First, I would direct anyone watching this to Google poodle science. There's an awesome video. It's really short. I think it's maybe 5 minutes or so, created by Deb Burgard, who's a wonderful therapist in the community, and using the health at every size principles. So just Google it, poodle science. It's the first thing to show up. And it's really the best explanation of that I've found that's really kind of succinct and just kind of fun to watch of why it doesn't work to take somebody, for example, who's in a larger body and try to squeeze them into the kind of thin ideal of somebody in a smaller body. It's the equivalent in this poodle science video of trying to make a mastiff, which is a really large dog, look like a Chihuahua, for example. You just can't do that, right? A Mastiff will never be a Chihuahua, and a Chihuahua will never be a Mastiff. They have very different genetic makeups. They have different dietary requirements, different activity requirements, different lifespans, different health issues, just like we as humans do. We all have very different makeups. And so there's just no point in trying to fit into one little box because it doesn't meet the needs of everyone. The Health at Every Size movement is behind that video that I was talking about. So for more information, you can also look up Health at Every Size.
Oh, wow. I'll definitely make sure to check that out then. And I think that's what it's all about, really embracing different body types and not trying to just enclose in that one sort of mindset. And personally, I really like both Mastiffs and Chihuahuas. So I love that analogy.
Both are great.
So now for a little bit more of like a psychological question. In your experience, does a person's relationship with food affect their view of themselves, or does the view of themselves affect their relationship with food?
It's both, definitely. Reestablishing a healthy relationship with food and body allows the whole person to flourish because the mind and body are really interconnected. And so you can't have one or the other. They both have to happen equally.
Oh, okay. Got it. And do you think that social media has impacted teenagers on their development of eating disorders, or has there been a change in statistical trends about eating disorders in the past years that may be correlated to social media usage?
Unfortunately, yes, both. It's on the rise. Statistically, it's on the rise, and for a multitude of reasons, but social media being one of them.
Oh, wow. That will definitely make us reconsider the amount of social media we use.
Yeah.
Even though it may be something helpful, we can also kind of fall into that trap sometimes, which is
Definitely. Yeah, it can be both.
Mm-hmm. And also, I saw on the plate by plate approach social media, I'll actually show a picture right here, that you did an activity over Thanksgiving with a 6.5-year-old who drew a brightly colored and cute and joyful meal. And so I was inspired to ask you this question. So, do you think starting at an early age and having an educational program with activities such as those that I showed be beneficial to teens and children in order to hopefully prevent these maybe eating disorders from developing in the future?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot of research to back up family meals as a really important foundational tool for both early nutrition intervention, but also to build stronger relationships with kids and families. So that's a really good starting point. You don't necessarily need to impart nutrition information, the specifics of nutrition at an early age, but you need to create a space for kids to continue to eat intuitively. Everyone's born eating intuitively, and we interfere with that when we listen to kind of external messages rather than our own internal hunger and fullness cues. So having families learn more about intuitive eating, how to provide balanced meals and a safe space for kids to explore food without restriction is really the best tool that you can give them from a nutrition standpoint.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And do you know of programs that are already doing such like these types of activities in schools, making them focus on intuitive eating instead of counting calories or those methods?
Yes, yes. There are a lot of nutrition programs out there. It's almost impossible for me to keep up with all of them. Unfortunately, the vast majority are coming from an obesity prevention kind of task force standpoint without using a health at every size model. Those two kind of entities have not fully connected yet. And I look forward to the day and hope it's soon that they do, because I think you can have both. I think you can have, programs going into the schools that are talking about balanced and healthy eating, like our plate by plate approach, for example, without it having the kind of negative connotation of obesity underlying all of it, or the threat or fear of disease associated with food. I think you can unpair those two things. There are some groups, though, that are not nutrition focused, but that go into schools. The Body Positive is a Bay Area program, which is really wonderful. So you could look into that too. And they will often go into schools and do workshops that promote, positive self-esteem and body image and things like that.
Oh, wow. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's a great organization.
Also, I think having like maybe, how you were saying it would be probably even better if there were a lot of different programs, even with schools that don't like have much problems with obesity and stuff like that, just so that those connotations aren't just be given to those schools who may have more higher rates of obesity.
Exactly, yeah.
And so in regards to middle schoolers and maybe even teenagers, do you think it would be beneficial to have programs in schools to inform students on healthy eating habits and eating disorders? Or do you think that should be, because I know you were talking about it earlier, making sure that we're talking about intuitive eating instead of the actual.
Yeah, typically it tends to be more helpful to provide programs that are focused on health at every size, positive body image, self-esteem, and intuitive eating rather than on eating disorders. Too much focus on eating disorders can sometimes backfire. That's what some of the research has shown us. So it's much better to focus on kind of just promoting positive body image and joyful eating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely finding that right balance in a lot of different things with food or with even like information that might overpower them or even make them, feel a little bit overwhelmed.
Right. Yep.
And do you see your plate-by-plate approach being extended to schools, or is it already in schools? Or
in a way, it is, in a very tiny way. We often, when I say we, I'm also talking about my colleague, Wendy Sterling, who co-wrote the book with me and co-developed the approach with me. We get asked to go into schools to do school outreach, at least pre-pandemic, all the time. And so we will do, just kind of short sessions, educational sessions with schools who ask us for that, but we haven't kind of disseminated that information beyond our clientele and our colleagues. But I would love to see it in the schools. I do think it could be useful. It's not just for work with people with eating disorders. It can be used for the sort of basics of it can be used with anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think having like I've seen similar like things sort of that's the plate by plate, but I think this one is even like a little bit more like maybe powerful because it shows a visual approach rather than kind of as we were talking, rather than just like the substances in the foods that may be calories or those different types of approaches. So I'm really fascinated by this type of approach. I really like.
Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And in your experience, have you seen a difference between the eating disorder rates between different economic statuses, cross-culturally, across genders, or like just generally upon different demographics?
So what we know now, it used to be that that yes, there was a difference, or at least that's what was observed. But what we found out over the years was that was just an access issue. Whoever had the resources, the access to get a diagnosis from a doctor or a therapist, for example. So those numbers were skewed. Now there's greater information out there. There are more resources out there. More providers are educated about what to look for with eating disorders. And so we're seeing that, there are no real differences across any of these different, kind of subsets. So we see that eating disorders exist across all cultures. We see that they exist across, the whole kind of spectrum of gender identity, different socioeconomic statuses. Eating disorders don't discriminate among those things, which is, it's great that we are catching more of these individuals with eating disorders, but also kind of a sad reality that they are on the rise. And certainly during the pandemic, there's been a marked increase in eating disorders, which is an unfortunate side effect.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and continuing with the axis that you were talking about, because has like COVID changed those rates, maybe possibly due to the lack of access now, or is it continuing to be kind of as it was before?
That's a really good question. I think it might be too early for us to know. what I'm seeing within my network is that providers are impacted. People are really full, booked up because the number of individuals struggling with eating disorders has increased so dramatically. There also is, in some way, more access because so many providers are virtual. So, for example, in my practice, while I'm located in the East Bay physically, I can reach anyone in California. Primarily, I'm seeing individuals in the Greater Bay Area, but my reach is much farther. So, from that standpoint, the access is there. Of course, people need to have a phone or a computer to be able to access telehealth, which is a barrier for some.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It might actually maybe increase in access for some. I mean, of course, like you mentioned, some may not have that technology, but it could be very beneficial for those who maybe weren't able to come in person before. So that's
Definitely. Yep.
And for the people who may be watching, what are some places teenagers and their families can visit to help, to find help and maybe some ways or information on eating disorders and recovery in our communities?
Good question. The kind of top place to go, which is national, is the National Eating Disorders Association. So NEDA, NEDA. They have a huge following and a lot of resources on their website and a hotline and all of those things. So that would be the first place to go. Locally in the Bay Area, Stanford Children's Hospital, UCSF, and the Healthy Teen Project are all always open to consultation and kind of phone call inquiries so that they can help provide information to those in need.
Got it. That will probably be very, very helpful since I'm sure there's also, an increase, like we were mentioning before. Hopefully more people will be able to get access to those types of resources, which was really beneficial.
Yep, definitely.
And on the other hand, what are some ways to empower teenagers to help create a positive environment with food as a source for joy in our schools and communities? Or what is a good place for students to start who want to take action?
So you can join NEDA, the National Eating Disorders Association. They have a lot of volunteer events throughout the year. They often do walks for eating disorders awareness and things like that. The Body Positive is always looking for volunteers and new members. And then I would say looking into health at every size and joining that movement as well. You can also use social media in a positive way and follow those types of accounts. So the Body Positive has one, Health at Every Size has one, and then there's a whole host of others. I won't list them all off right now, but just going to those two, you could then see a lot of other links to other body positive inspired pages and accounts.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing those. I think I haven't heard of all of them, but I'm definitely now more intrigued to learn more about them and look more into them and maybe even, volunteer with them or anything.
Great.
But yeah, so that was actually all my questions. And to end off the interview portion of the video, I just wanted to thank the viewers for watching and stay tuned for more interviews.
Thank you.